Hey everyone, we were able to get a hold of the Durston X-Mid Pro 2 tent earlier this spring. We were super excited to receive it in time for us to go on a backpacking trip out west. And now that we've put the tent to use for 3 nights backpacking, we wanted to give you a review of what we think about it initially. So overall, we are still really pleased with this tent. We did run into a couple of hiccups with it, and we want to tell you about those so that you can know what you're getting into if you're thinking about buying this tent, or so that if you already have it, you can take better care of it yourself. So first, let me tell you about some of the things that we loved about the tent. The tent was super easy to set up. We had no trouble setting it up in Zion or in either of the 2 nights we spent in the Grand Canyon. We did end up adding some extensions to the guy lines so that we could set up the tent on rocky surfaces, because I think every night we were out west, there was at least one corner of the tent where we couldn't stake it out. And we also used the guy lines that are on the sides of the tent. We used more than just the 6 minimal stakes each night. Part of that is just our preference. I think we're just used to having tents staked out more. And then part of that is also because we were camping on 2 nights that were really windy. We seriously put this tent through the ringer. Yeah, thoughts on the Durston? Well, we've got the...
It needs a lot of guy lines.
Needs a lot of guidelines to feel...
In the Grand Canyon, it needs a lot of extra little ropes so you can tie off to rocks instead of stakes. Because stakes are almost pointless here.
Yeah, we've gotten like 2 in tonight, like 4 in the other night.
Yeah.
It really held up to the wind well. Like last night was 35-mile-an-hour constant winds, I think.
Yeah.
Plus some gusts, and it held up really well to that. I mean, it felt like, if you've ever seen the movie The Martian, it kind of felt like the scene where Matt Damon is just like sitting in the whatever chamber he's in, and everything is just like flapping, and you're like, is this gonna hold?
Yeah,
but it held. It held, and like the tent poles as our stakes worked, and the quilt kept us really warm.
The tent poles as our poles, not our stakes.
Sorry, tent poles as our poles. I'm never gonna get that right. But yeah, overall,
the hiking poles as our
pretty positive.
Yeah, it works.
Another thing we really liked about the tent is its size. It's just way roomier than other backpacking tents that we have been using in our lifetime anyway. And so because it's lightweight and roomy, we really get the best of both worlds. One of the nights that we spent in the tent, I mentioned the wind earlier. It was just so cold and windy that we really needed to be inside the tent for protection. And it worked super well for us to have all of our stuff in the vestibules. We were very comfortable, both able to sit up in the tent at the same time. We could unpack our bags and gear at the same time. We could pack up in the morning in the tent and just have a lot of elbow room and wiggle room to like change into and out of our hiking clothes or sleeping clothes. Now for the hiccups. There's really 2 things we ran into. The first is that we had really bad condensation our first night in the tent. It was definitely a moist night, and that was surprising because we were in Zion National Park, but there was just no wind that night, and the morning there was dew and light water everywhere, like on the ground all around us. So it was clearly a sort of more humid night than you would expect in the desert, but it's definitely less humid there than it was, say, in conditions you might face on the Appalachian Trail when you're going to be spending most of the summer hiking with humidity. The condensation was bad. We did not have any pack towels or anything to dry it off with, and that's something we actually ended up packing with us on our 2nd and 3rd nights just in case we needed it. The condensation also, because it was so thick and we weren't used to how to sleep yet, we were kind of rubbing our quilt up against the side of the walls more than we should have been. So then our quilt also got wet from the condensation. But we were able to fix that. Hopefully that's kind of a rare situation, but a lot of people talk about condensation with this tent, so it's worth knowing that we did run into some problems with it. So the second hiccup we ran into with the tent is that it already has 2 holes in it. One is in the mesh door and one is on the floor. Neither of the holes really make a lot of sense to us, and we did reach out to Durston to see what they would say if we let them know that we had holes. They, generally were responsive. Like, I appreciate that a company writes you back when the owner of a company writes you back when you reach out with a problem. But they also thought the holes came from things that really just are unlikely to be true. So one of the holes is in the mesh door of the tent, and it's pretty high up. Durston thought that maybe its most likely cause was an animal trying to get into the tent. And that certainly is possible, although it seems pretty unlikely to us because, one, it's pretty high up, it's not on ground level, and two, we don't store any scented items, like anything, no food, no toothbrushes, no toothpaste. We don't store any scented items in our tent. Surely this could be a one fluke time that an animal tried to get in, but it seems pretty unlikely, again, especially since it was so high up. So it was like up here on the tent. The second hole is actually on the ground of the tent. And what's really weird about this one is that there's a hole in the bottom of the tent, but we used our ground cover every night when we were out, and there's no hole in the ground cloth. So I don't know if a rock got in between the two somehow or what else could have happened, but it's not cool. So right now we have the holes patched, and one of the reasons we wanted to reach out to them was just to confirm that our patching methods would work well with the tent. So we used a mesh patch on the door, and then we fixed this one using tenacious tape on the inside and silicone glue on the underneath side of the tent. And we're hoping this is going to keep it from being having water problems down the road. We are going to be extra careful with how we're storing, setting up, and carrying the tent from now on because we don't want to keep getting holes every time we use it. But we're definitely keeping an eye on the product because even though we know they use sort of industry standard materials, the fact that we got this many holes with really no good explanation that makes sense so early on in using it is a little troubling. This is a really expensive tent, so it's definitely not for everyone. But if you're looking to cut weight in your pack and you want an option that is roomy, then this might be a really good fit for you. We are really intrigued to use it this summer. We'll be backpacking about 14 nights in various national parks across the country, and we're gonna keep our fingers crossed that we still love it as much at the end of the summer as we do right now.